Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking a moment to listen to me share a little bit about cult food science and the role we play in this ecosystem. And I'm also going to take a moment to speak a little bit about this dichotomy that we're seeing in the marketplace. And I call it Zoomers and Boomers, but we'll talk a little bit about it as we go here. So for cult food science, so we're trying to democratize access to the future of food. So what this means is that due to security laws, it's very difficult for a retail investor currently to get access into these cell egg plays. You need to be accredited, or you have to have so much liquid assets to apply for these like investment facilities. And so our thesis right now is to create a public instrument in which we can allow retail investors to have an opportunity to participate in the market that they actually care about. So we'll explain a little bit why that plays a role in the ecosystem. So currently to date, we have 13 companies that we've taken positions into. They span 4 continents, and we're trying to get exposure to all the different verticals within the broader cellular agricultural space. And this is an overview of the companies we've invested in to date. Just so everyone is aware, we're actively still investing. We're hoping to actually have a pretty strong year in 2022. If you happen to be a company who's considering raising or is raising, I would love to hear from you. We're openly taking all conversations, so just a little plug there. So by the numbers, how does the industry look? So we heard earlier today, like 70 plus companies existence. And I think that's probably light. We've heard 80, could be even more. It's hard to track sometimes. These small startups come out of nowhere. So in the year 2022, the industry booked 366 million in equity. It did an additional 440 just in the first half of 21. And a very exciting news flash came out this week with every company booking 175 million in an oversubscribed deal. I think what this is showing us is that there's a tremendous amount of appetite to get exposure into this ecosystem. And if we're seeing a 2x in funding happening, if it's every year, that's incredible. But for the next couple of years, I just think it shows that there's tangible traction from the investment community. By 2030, McKinsey and Company estimated a $25 billion market for cultivated meat. Personally, I think that's light, and it's kind of our mission or our job at Cult that we want to empower the community and the portfolio companies we have to surpass that number. Like let's as a group be better than that and show them that we can take way more market share way quicker. I'm personally bullish on that number. And so hopefully I don't eat my words, but I would love to see us do much better than that. So we heard earlier, there's some pretty interesting, what I would consider traditional protein companies making investments into this space today. From a business standpoint, I think this is extremely interesting. This is actually not really typical of something you would see this early in an ecosystem. Pretty glaring example of this is Netflix historically pitched and tried to sell themselves to Blockbuster back in the day, and Blockbuster turned them down and said no, and we know exactly how that story played out. And so often traditional companies in this space hesitate to get involved. We're obviously not seeing that right now. We're seeing almost the exact opposite approach, where they're taking early meaningful steps to be engaged. And I think there's 2 general ideas to this. I think some people are a little bit scared that we might see like some mothballing or shutting down of trajectories of these small, fragile companies. And then I think other people are tremendously excited to see these large companies come and play in the sandbox. I think as an ecosystem, we can manage this appropriately. This is obviously new for everyone. It's new for them to be involved so early, and it's new for the startups to have this much capital or this much infrastructure coming in so early. So I think let's proceed cautiously, but also let's leverage the opportunity we have that doesn't exist in a lot of other startup industries. So I think this is very cool that this is happening. So Cult just announced their Cult Prize. It's a 2-year, $1 million competition to find, fund, and incubate research initiatives. This is a part of our core mission to help accelerate and give back to the community. This is open today for applicants to apply. We're obviously still ironing out some of the details on our end, but I encourage you, if you feel that this is something you would like to either know more about or be involved with, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're working very closely with all the applicants that come in to make sure that we are transparent in the process ahead and what our expectations are. So obviously, if you're interested, please reach out. So just changing gears a bit, just talking about bridging the generational gap. And so I'm going to talk in loose terms. So if you're like seeing a slide and you're like, hey, I'm that person, but I don't fit that description, I apologize. These are just general market observations is what we're going to talk about. So who are we speaking to? As an industry, we need to educate both our future customer as well as policymakers. And I think this leads to a very interesting dichotomy. And in my case, I call it Zoomers and Boomers, but Gen X is part of this conversation as well. And it's this idea that I believe the Zoomer generation is our target customers, but policymakers and people of management who reside overlooking our industry are largely the Boomer and Gen X generation. So maybe you guys know this, maybe you don't, just general high level here. But the Boomers and Gen X generation are 41 to 66. That's kind of like the working age bracket. Both of these generations grew up as children without the internet. So obviously very different than a Zoomer. They're self-sufficient. They have a more controlled approach to technology. They don't engage with it as regularly or as often as we do on a daily basis. And for decades now, they've refined their eating habits and how they shop for their household. So they're not stuck in their ways, but they've certainly built up their own routines that would be hard to dislodge at this point. And these are the individuals who largely sit in a position of management and policy making in the world, right? So this is ultimately who we have to educate on how we want to move our technology into the marketplace. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have the Zoomers. So we have 9 to 24 years old. This is the activist generation, as we heard about earlier this morning from Amy. They're uncompromising and they're not easily swayed by marketing tricks or tactics. They are well educated in the brands they support, and it has to represent their interests. And they're not preoccupied with social labels or institutional reputations. Like if you say Nike and Nike goes off the rails and does something that they don't agree with, very quickly Nike won't be an it brand for this generation because it doesn't carry a reputational pull to the other generations, like maybe mine as a millennial or a Gen X. So this is the consumer group, in my opinion. I think this is extremely exciting that we have these consumers who are coming of age at the same time that our industry's technologies is coming to age. And so I think together we have such a cool opportunity here to foster just such a shift in our food industry. So we need to have effective messaging as an industry. And how do we communicate to policymakers who obviously are going to interpret and look at our technology in one way without jeopardizing our brand or our mission to our core customer group? And I think I have some suggestions. They're not answers. I don't think we have the answers yet, but transparency and truthfulness, I think, is always a policy that will win in the long term, especially with the Gen Zs. They need to know what they're consuming is what you say it is. And so one thing I want to stay away from in this industry is if we're in the bioscience sphere and we're looked at as like these lab growing kind of scary products, we're getting pushed into that pharma world. And I think that's a very bad trap for our industry to get into. We want to avoid being labeled as pharma or too heavy on the lab side. And so we can approach that with an open door policy. We can educate in a meaningful and open way. It was very cool to hear this morning Upsides talk about, yeah, our entire facility has open glass windows. We want people to see what we're doing. I just think that's so important at this point to, pull back the veil and say, this is how we're operating. Another suggestion I have is empowering our customers. So Gen Z is incredibly gifted at spreading awareness and information about topics and technologies that resonate with their values. And I think if we can arm our customers, we can help show momentum in industry. And I think that will actually sway or show policymakers that this is real, this is tangible, there's people who want to consume this product. Help us bring it to fruition with proper policy and safety protocols that allow this to happen. And then lastly, the sum of the parts. I think as an industry, we need to remember that this mission we're on is much greater than us as individuals. Yes, we're all in this to succeed or to, push our individual products or missions or values forward. But ultimately, as an entire ecosystem, what we're doing is incredibly important. And so sometimes it's nice to step back a bit and just get perspective on the lay of the land. And we need a healthy ecosystem around development, support, and collaboration at all levels, like private codes to private codes, private to public, nonprofits. All of us play like a really strategic role, and we have to remember that. So how does Cult fit into this? Well, I think we have a really cool opportunity at Cult to align our customers with equity or ownership. And so our kind of mission here is, how cool is it that we can go and democratize access to the companies that they want to see succeed and make them have a bonded connection to that. So, hey, company A, I want to eat this product in 2 years when it's on the shelf. But it's even more important to me because I actually get to support and own part of your success. And so now I'm walking around as a customer, I'm telling my friends or I'm telling my parents, why is this important? And so Cult is trying to foster a deeper connection into our customers and create an attached bond. And we can leverage that in many different ways that we haven't even started to really put time or allocation towards. But I think as our model continues to unfold, we can really leverage that. And the role Cult can play in the marketplace, I think, is going to be really cool. And so that's just kind of a high level of Cult and kind of some communication hurdles that I see coming into the future. There's my LinkedIn and my email there, and I encourage anyone who wants to reach out to reach out.